Well, folks, I'm joined today by Lacey Scarmana, one of my favorite people and the co-founder of Suspect Convictions. We began on this endeavor, about 2 years ago, didn't we, Lacey? Why don't you tell folks about that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that last week, actually. It was what would have been Jennifer's birthday. And that was the very first thing we did for Suspect Convictions was go to the cemetery on her birthday. And that's when we met with Sherry and Mary, and they were blowing up balloons. And so at the time last week, I was thinking it's so crazy that the trial's going on at the same time of year, and thinking at the time we might finally have an answer at the end of this case.
But we don't.
We don't.
Folks, today the jury came back and they said they're hopelessly deadlocked. And the judge declared a mistrial and said the prosecution has 90 days to retry the case. And the prosecutor said, we're retrying it. So somewhere in the state of Iowa, almost certainly not the Quad Cities, we're going to have a new trial in the next 3 months. And there's going to be another set of 12 years are going to get to hear the things that were presented this time. Lacey, have you had a chance to listen to much of the trial testimony?
I listened to some of the testimony, admittedly not all of it, but a good amount. And I think that it's just so hard to imagine. I mean, coming out of this, working on the podcast, people would always ask, what do you think? Do you think he's guilty? Do you think he'll be found not guilty? And it was so hard for me to say it after studying it and talking to so many people that I can't imagine being a person selected for the jury with no background knowledge, supposedly at the beginning at least, of the case, and trying to piece together why it's being tried so much later and why it's not being tried like right after the crime, and just the lack of physical evidence to go on, and then hearing all this testimony that's based on recollections that are almost 30 years old. It would be hard to know what to believe, I think.
And it was very strange to me. I mean, I remember, I was about your age when I covered this case originally, 28 years ago. And I remember these detectives that worked the case were young and they're vibrant and they're kind of intimidating. And some of them were coming into the courtroom in walkers, and some of them have died. And it's like, man, I mean, it really brought home to me how long ago this was. I mean, nobody who worked that case, and there were probably 30 or 40 different FBI agents, Davenport, Iowa Police, Rock Island Police, all these different agencies that worked it. None of those people are still employed. I mean, they've all retired or gone on to other things or died or whatever. I mean,
yeah, it's literally a lifetime ago, my lifetime ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, it was strange. And, I'll admit, I mean, Mike Walton had a great line during jury selection. There's a reason why we read to children to get them to go to sleep. It works. And, they read something like 28 different witnesses that have died or weren't available during the trial. And, man, that just got awfully boring, awfully quick. And It had to be frustrating for the jurors because their job is to gauge credibility, to weigh the facts. How do you do that when somebody's reading from a script? You hear what was said, but you don't hear how it was said. You don't see if the witnesses glancing over at the prosecution or at the defense and looking for kind of a tip, a nod of the head or whatever. You don't get to see their demeanor or anything else. I'm sure it's frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating for all parties concerned, but I don't know how you get around that.
Yeah, I don't know how you can really spice it up without hauling the back end of that Peugeot into the courtroom and getting people excited about something.
And they couldn't even fit it in there. So
yeah,
it's hard to know. I mean, what could have been done? But you worked this case for a really long time, and this was kind of took over our lives for a stretch. what sticks out in your mind as the most striking thing, or the thing that was overwhelming to you in this story?
I think the most overwhelming thing was talking to Jennifer's godmother and just seeing how emotional she still is now and how she just wants closure. And we didn't get to talk to Stanley Liggins, but I imagine there's kind of the opposite feeling being mirrored on his end, where he's been sitting in prison and then jail for a while for a crime that he's trying to prove that did not do. So I think it's just kind of frustrating and really taking a toll on everybody. And I think just that human element of it, of waiting more than 20 years to find an answer and find closure, must be so frustrating to be in it. I mean, it's frustrating for us covering it. So when it's actually your life and you're going to be impacted by it, I can't imagine.
I can't either. And, one of the things that struck me was the change in appearance of Stanley Liggins. 27 years ago, he was a very intimidating man. I mean, he was scary to look at, to be in the same room with. I mean, whether he did this crime or he didn't, came off as a very intimidating, violent individual. And indeed he was. I mean, he had a number of convictions, a number of problems in prison. This was a man of violence. Now he looks like a middle-aged man. He's losing the hair on top of his head. He's blind in one eye. He's wearing very dark prescription glasses. He doesn't have the same aura around him that he did decades ago. And I wonder if that played a role in the mix. I mean, he also was much better behaved. You'll remember that...
no outbursts this time.
No outbursts this time at all. You'll remember Stanley was the guy at the Dubuque trial who motherfuckered the jury box, got up and called them all a bunch of motherfuckers. And this time around, he was very quiet. He was very respectful. He rose early whenever it's time for the jurors to come in. He showed them nothing but deference. It was a very different Stanley Liggins this time around. So I wonder, how he was feeling about things. It must be in some ways kind of frustrating to him. I'm sure he goes back to his cell every night and it's like, well, am I going to be a free man or am I going to stay in prison? Am I going to be a free man or am I going to stay in prison? And he comes in and comes back with a hung jury. Well, we'll let you know later. And
yeah. I wonder if in some way that's kind of comforting, that at least it's not completely over for him yet.
Yeah. I don't know. I wish Stanley could share with us what he was thinking. I mean, I spoke to him a couple times. He'd come back into the media room. That was the room they took him to when he needed to go to the bathroom. And sometimes I was back there working, and I'd say, Stanley, how do you think it's going today? And he just kind of give me a look like, I am not talking to you. Or I'd ask him, are you going to speak in your own defense? And he wouldn't answer that. Of course, he chose not to.
Yeah.
But was there anything that surprised you, monitoring this trial? Obviously, you're living in New York City now, and you're a big time producer on CBS News. I mean, was there anything that struck you as something that, why didn't the prosecutor bring this up, or why didn't the defense bring this up when you were listening in?
I can't think of anything specific. Was there something you were thinking of?
Well, I was surprised they didn't do more with the whole Wanda Hughes. She's the reason that they are having this trial. She's the reason why all this is going on. She was the witness who looked out her window and saw the taillights near the fire, but nobody knew she was already a paid police informant. That was what they testified to during the trial, but the appellate court disagreed and said, hey, that should have been disclosed. That's why they're getting this third trial. So I'm wondering, why didn't the defense hit that harder? Wait a minute here. What are the odds that the person who just happened to look out the window and just happened to see the taillights and just happened to come forward 2 weeks after Stanley's arrest also just happened to be somebody already on the police payroll?
Yeah.
and that never really got hit hard. That surprised me. I think that would have been something that would have been pretty compelling. I mean, to bring cast doubt on her, not only a cast doubt on her, I think it could have cast doubt on a lot of the other prosecution witnesses. Like, what are they trying to pull the wool over our eyes? What's going on here? And I'm not saying they are or they aren't. I'm just saying what we're dealing with perception. And I was really surprised that they didn't hit that issue harder. She was, I thought, somebody who really they ought to have looked at hard. And I'm sorry. I'm trying really to think about this. But okay, now Chief of Police Don Schaefer, who's retired, he was a lieutenant back when this was happening. He said he had no idea that Wanda was already a paid police informant working for somebody undercover. And then they brought in the undercover officers that were in charge of managing her. And they said, we had no idea she was involved in the Stanley Liggins case. And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't New York City. This is Davenport, Iowa, a relatively small CID, criminal investigation division there. I mean, everybody knows everybody. They're on a first name basis with everybody. And Wanda's testimony was on the front page of the Quad City Times. And nobody thought to mention to anybody else, hey, she works for me too. I just find that almost impossible to believe. I'm sorry. It could happen, but it just seems unlikely to me.
Yeah.
And I also I couldn't help but scratch my head at Frank Rising, the cellmate of Stanley Liggins. Okay. He comes in his prison uniform with the black and white stripes and in shackles. You can hear his chains rattling as he goes up to the witness stand. And then he says, he made up everything he told me in my interview. And if you remember right, I basically just kind of stuck a tape recorder in front of his face and said, well, tell me, that was a pretty important thing you did 20 some years ago. And then he starts spilling his guts, telling me, oh, I was compelled to do it. This is how it happened. And they threatened me. And, they did this and that. And now he said he made it all up. Well, okay. What we do know for sure is he's a liar. Either he was lying to me and the listeners of suspect convictions, or he was lying to the folks in the courtroom. We don't know which. But we also know that you have to ask yourself, is he a credible witness? I mean, I don't know. I really don't. But it's hard for me to believe you have somebody sharing a cell with somebody for months and they aren't speaking to each other. And then the first words he speaks is, yeah, I may have killed her, but they'll never get me for it.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know.
Do you think he will opt for another jury trial?
I don't know. That is a really good question. I thought Judge Marlita Greaves was very fair. She ruled right down the middle. I think she bent over backwards on some rulings to make sure things were fair for the defense. Because, Lord knows, nobody wants to see this get tried again. But hey, guess what? It is going to get tried again. Now the defense attorneys in the case are very much familiar with her and her rulings and how she thinks. They spent a month in the same room with her. Maybe they'll go back to Stanley and say, hey, maybe we'd be better off just doing this in front of Judge Greaves.
Mm-hmm.
But although I wonder what the logistics of that are. I mean, Judge Greaves has already listened to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Does she have to listen to it all over again? Or can she say, hey, I'll just review the evidence and get back to you? I don't know how that works. I would assume they have to go through it all over again. So I don't know. It's been an interesting ride, is all I can say for our listeners. I mean, we started this 2 years ago. We've looked at a lot of cases, but this has been the biggest case we've looked at by far. There's so many different twists and turns. I just can't help but think about this. Here it is this week. The week after Jennifer's birthday, she'd been 37 years old now, or 38. You know, that poor child never had a chance, did she, Lacey?
No, that's the sad part. Um, just thinking back on her life, and I don't know, maybe she would have overcome all of her obstacles, but even now with her death, there's no closure still.
No.
And I know that's what her family and those who loved her want, at least on her behalf. But it seems like that's 90 plus days off in the future still, at least.
At least, I mean, they may end up with another hung jury.
Yeah.
And for that matter, they may end up with an acquittal, But I, for one, after all my years as a reporter, am of the opinion that closure is kind of a myth.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think you learn to deal with things, you learn to live with them, but you don't ever really reach closure, if that makes any sense. So, what else should we share with our listeners before we sign off today?
I don't know. This case obviously is not a typical case to go to trial this many times and have convictions overturned. But I think that this, really shows true crime, that you're kind of bound by the boundaries of reality, that, we literally can't make this stuff up. Like, he's been tried for this now 4 times. And
he's been tried 3 times, but then he's been tried a 4th time for a different murder. I mean, how many people in life get tried 4 times for murder?
Yeah. Well, this will be his 4th time now as they go again for this case. But
you're right. I mean, but here's something that ran through my mind. I mean, the prosecution tried very hard to present to the jury that Stanley Liggins had sexually abused another 9-year-old girl a month before Jennifer's murder. And of course, he was eventually convicted in that case. And, he was accused of also sexually abusing his girlfriend's 3-year-old daughter. The Illinois authorities decided not to pursue that case because of the child's age and because of the likelihood Stanley would end up spending the rest of his life in prison in Iowa anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that the jurors should have been told about those cases?
I mean, that's part of that. We, I think, spent a bulk of an episode talking about prior bad acts and whether they can be held against you for a current case. So I don't know. I think that if his connection to the family of dealing drugs was the reason that the jury knew that was why his first conviction was thrown out, I don't see how this is any different than that.
I get that, but I guess it's kind of, to me, here's the analogy I would use. Would you marry somebody that you hadn't dated?
No. And I think that definitely, since this case did involve sexual abuse too, there's a connection there for sure.
But the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. The reason we date people before we marry them is we want to see what their behavior is like before we marry them. So, I mean, I get that, bringing in prior bad acts can be so overwhelming for the jurors that they'll lose sight of other things. But on the other hand, it also can be pretty enlightening for them if they get a little bit better sense of who this person is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought it was interesting. It was interesting riding the elevator down with with some of the jurors and lawyers today after the trial. And actually, the judge was in the elevator with us too. One of the jurors told the assistant defense counsel that she looked just like Reese Witherspoon. And I've heard some speculation that maybe the defense had her sitting right next to Stanley Liggins to make him seem harmless. I don't know if that's true or what, but that thought has been kicked around as well. But I thought all of the lawyers involved in this case were very capable. I was very impressed all the way around. I mean, there didn't just seem to be a great disparity in the caliber of attorneys on either side. A lot of times, frankly, when you go into these trials, the prosecution has the talent and you have couple of beginners on the defense side. They're really struggling to keep up. And this time around, you had experienced attorneys going against each other. You had a lot of really quality work being done in the court. Anyway, well, it's great for you to join me, Lacey. I didn't know how to tell this story to our listeners. I mean, it's not something that lends itself very well to the narrative. The judge, especially when the judge has ordered all the jurors not to talk to the media. I've never encountered that, I might add, in my 30 years in journalism, where a judge said, don't talk to any reporters. I mean, after a trial's over.
Oh, after the fact? Yeah.
Yeah, I obviously for season 1, we interviewed a lot of jurors and got some interesting quotes doing that. But this time around, the judge said, I don't want any of you to talk to any reporters. I kind of get issued out of order. I don't know. I was surprised at that. But and the attorneys got to talk to him and get a better feel. But that's kind of what we know.
Okay. To be continued.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lacey. You have a good one.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Folks, I want to talk to you today about a product I really like. They're called RX bars. I started trying them out, 8 or 9 months ago, and I really like them. In fact, during this month-long trial that I just got done covering, I packed up my computer bag full of RX bars and would snack on them during mid-afternoon and mid-morning. And they were just great. In fact, they were so great, the TV cameraman that sat next to me kept bumming them off of me. He loved them. He's hooked, and so am I. When I first started eating RX bars, I wasn't sure if I really should or not, because I gave up all sweets 5.5 years ago. And I haven't had any candy, I haven't had any desserts, and I'm thinking, well, are RX bars like cheating? I mean, is that like a sweet? And then I read their ingredients, and they're healthy stuff like egg whites and dates and nuts. I mean, there's no added sugar. They're just really wonderful. I really enjoy them. They're great for road trips. I'll take them with me, and I'll have them to snack on. Or, like when I had to go down to Texas to do some reporting a couple months ago, and I brought them on the airplane with me. And they're just good to have all the way around. RX bars want to build things the right way. RX bar believes in the power of transparency and lets the core ingredients do all the talking, with all of them listed on the front of the packaging. You'll likely recognize RX bar at the shelf. They're the ones with, as I said, egg whites for protein, dates to bind, nuts for texture, and other delicious ingredients like unsweetened chocolate, real fruit, and spices like sea salt or cinnamon. Turns out, real food ingredients actually taste really good. And believe me, they do. I just love them. RX bars are gluten-free, soy-free, and dairy-free. Whether you like sweet or savory, chocolate or fruit flavors, there's definitely an RX bar out there for you. There's no artificial colors, artificial flavors, preservatives, or fillers. RX bars are great for a number of occasions. Breakfast on the go, snack at the office to push you through that 3 p.m. slump, or you can just throw in your bag on the plane. Toss in your backpack for a bike ride or a hike, or right before or after a workout. Egg white protein stands out as a source of protein that it's easy for your body to absorb. RX bars come in 14 delicious varieties, including mango pineapple, chocolate hazelnut, peanut butter and berries, chocolate sea salt. Wonderful. Gotta try that one, guys. Coconut chocolate, mixed berry, blueberry, maple sea salt, apple cinnamon, mint chocolate, chocolate chip, peanut butter chocolate, which I really like as well, and coffee chocolate. And now they have seasonal flavors too. And now RX Bar has debuted an RX Nut Butter, which contains a few simple and similar ingredients like egg whites, fruits, and nuts. Each single-serve packet contains delicious creamy nut butter with 9 grams of high-quality protein. It's squeezable and spreadable, pairs great with fruit, rice cakes, pretzels, or straight out of the pouch. Our nut butter flavors are honey cinnamon peanut butter, vanilla almond butter, and I can't recommend this firm enough. I really enjoy their stuff. I keep it in my office at home, in the studio where I record these, and I just really recommend them to you. For 25% off your first order, visit rxbar.com/suspect and enter the promo code SUSPECT at checkout. Once again, folks, for 25% off your first order, visit rxbar.com/suspect and enter the promo code SUSPECT at checkout. One more time, folks. For 25% off your first order, visit rxbar.com/suspect and enter the promo code SUSPECT at checkout. Try it. You'll really like it.
In court cases that end in a conviction, victims and their families are often allowed to make an impact statement, a statement of record of what they had before the crime and what they were left with after. But for unsolved crimes, crimes that don't end in a conviction, or serious life-altering events that aren't crimes at all, there is nowhere for the victims or their families to speak. Impact Statement is a new podcast that talks to victims and their families about life before, during, and after a life-changing event. Impact Statement combines compelling narration with interview clips to give a clear retelling while allowing those who have been affected the most to speak. Impact Statement can be found in Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app.